Absolutely.
Well, we will go ahead and get started. There might be some folks that trickle in here in a little bit. I am really thankful that we get a chance to have a more informative but informal conversation with our World Awareness Week guests, Jesse Rudy and Greg Tarrant. I'm Dan Bennett. I have the pleasure of serving as professor of political science and the director for the Center for Faith and Flourishing. I'm going to skip over the flourish to talk about CFF, and I want to get into specifically the work that y'all are doing with Redeem International. You all, according to the website that you have, a Christian faith-based nonprofit dedicated to protecting some of the world's most vulnerable widows and orphans from violent abuse and exploitation. I'm going to kick things off this evening by asking some initial questions, but I hope we'll have some time to answer your questions as well. So please be thinking about what you'd like to know about the work of Redeem International and how these men's professional and academic experiences have prepared them for this sort of work, and how, if you're so moved, you can be involved. So beginning with Jesse. Jesse Rudy is the founder and CEO of Redeem International. Before founding Redeem in 2020, over dinner tonight, I learned February 1st, 2020 was the inaugural kickoff, and then everything went fine for the next few months, right? That nothing else happened in 2020. So good job. That was good timing. Before founding Redeem, he served for 12 years with International Justice Mission, where he led teams in Sri Lanka, Uganda, and the Philippines, and was a key member of its global leadership team. His expertise informs Redeem's mission, which deploys teams of local justice professionals to intervene on behalf of victims, partnering with local authorities to restore families to their homes and prosecute their abusers, ultimately creating a powerful deterrent effect that protects entire communities. Jesse holds a BS degree in pre-law, which no longer exists at JBU, but he did go to John Brown University, and a JD from the University of Virginia Law School. He resides just outside of Washington, D.C. with his wife, Amy, and their 3 children. Jesse, welcome back to John Brown University.
Thank you.
Greg Tarrant is Chief Operating Officer of Redeem International, where he relies on nearly 2 decades of international business and development experience in leading its global programmatic and support functions. That sounds technical. Yeah. It is what it is. Prior to Redeem, Greg served with IJM for 12 years, including as a field office director in Bolivia and Kenya, and vice president for financial planning at the IJM corporate headquarters. Greg earned a bachelor's degree in international business from John Brown University and an MBA from Thunderbird School of Global Management. Greg, thank you for being with us tonight.
Good to be here.
Great. So to kick things off, I'd like to ask what drew you to this sort of work? What was it about this kind of work that spoke to you and your, vocation, calling, vision for professional life?
I can go first. I guess what I would say, first of all, is this was not the plan. When I was at John Brown, I had zero vision for doing anything like this. I was dating a woman who's now my wife, and at one point while we were dating, she said, I'd like to move to Africa and work with children. And my response to that was, that sounds horrible. I would like to stay in the United States of America and make a lot of money. And I would like to give it to you so that you can go work in Africa with children. So it was not coming out of John Brown what I thought my career was going to be. But when I was at John Brown, I did the American Studies program in Washington, D.C. And while I was there, I met a guy by the name of Gary Haugen, who ultimately was the founder and CEO of International Justice Mission. And he was explaining to me this vision he had for an organization that would protect the poor from violence around the world. And basically, Gary doesn't say it this way anymore because he's much more polished than he was in 1997. But basically, he was like, look, we're looking for people who are professionally excellent, desperately dependent on Jesus, and who want to punch bad guys in the mouth. And I was like, I love all of those things. That sounds like so much fun to be a part of, but I don't want to do that because I want to be a lawyer in DC and I want to make a lot of money. And so I was like, you should do that and I will send you money so that you can do that thing. And that was going to be my part of the kingdom. And honestly, that's a great part of the kingdom. So like, if that's the part of the kingdom that you're going to be in, don't take this as like, that's a bad part. That's like nothing gets done if somebody doesn't fund it. So, but I went into my legal practice and I really loved being a lawyer. But what I found was that I wasn't really nearly as good at giving money away as I thought I would be. I found it really, really hard to let go. And so I was supporting IJM financially, and over the years, some things came up, and then a position came open, and we decided to throw our hat in the ring. And I ended up in Uganda. And on my very first day of work, my new team brought me into this little tent outside of the office, and they brought out all of the case files. And they walked me through story after story after story of these women that were being driven out of their homes and having the most horrible things that you can imagine done to them, like wells poisoned, livestock slaughtered, children raped, houses set on fire. And in all of the stories, essentially what happened is the women just went off into the bush and died. Like, because they didn't matter. And that, like, whatever it is, it like flipped the switch, because I was like, that can't happen, right? Because they matter. And so, I mean, basically what I learned in those first few months is like, I've seen every horrible thing that one human being can do to another human. But there is nobody in the world that is as alone and as disposed of as a woman in rural Uganda when her clan, the people that are supposed to be her protectors, that are supposed to be her family, decide that she's disposable. And so basically from that moment, I wanted to make sure that didn't happen anymore. And so that's what drew me into the work. Sorry, really long answer for a short question. Sorry.
Greg, what about you?
Yeah. I mean, the very short answer is Jesse kind of drew me into this work. But I think even being here at John Brown, I remember sort of a little bit different than what Jesse, we were roommates, and I remember at the time being like, no, I do want to do something. Like I'm compelled to think about what God has for my life. I don't want to pursue these things, but I didn't have a lot of direction in that, I would say. And so I would try different majors, I would try different things, and eventually settle on international business because I saw I was pretty good at it. I kind of didn't want to, honestly. I was like, I'd rather do something else, but I'm pretty good at this, so I'm going to graduate and we'll see what happens. But one of the things that I think of that the reason I ended up in this is trial and error, is just doing different things in my life and going, oh, I like this aspect of it a little bit, but I didn't like these things so much. So let me try a different job that's in this area. And little by little, I was sort of acquiring skills and experiences that by the time that Jesse actually joined IJM, like he was talking about, and was talking to me about the work they were doing, I realized I actually had a lot of the things that would help me be a good field office director. I had lots of cross-cultural experience. I had run small businesses. I had managed people cross-culturally. And so it did feel like when I was exposed to this type of work and a lot of the things that Jesse's saying that were so compelling, I was like, and I actually have skills that would allow me to be useful in this place. And so I do think of, God's mercy in that in some ways of going, this guy's clueless, but I'll just give him enough that he needs little by little to accumulate this thing so that when he comes across something that is like, wow, that moves me and I want to be a part of it, I'm actually ready to help in a very tangible way.
And come back in just a moment and talk about what John Brown University did or maybe didn't do in terms of preparing you for the kind of work that y'all are doing. But I want to step back for a second and just ask, so what do you do exactly? What does Redeem International do? Okay, you care for orphans and widows. Yep. That's great. What does that look like in practice? What is the specific sort of work that you all do? How do you do it practically? How do you help people who are maybe hard to find or living on the margins in Uganda? What does that look like?
Yeah. So I'll go broad and then I'll work down to more detailed. So at Redeem, our mission is to protect the homes and land of the world's most vulnerable widows and orphans. And we focus on land because for these women and children, land is everything. It's their primary source of food, income, shelter, security, their only savings they'll ever have, their position in the community. And the reality is that land is also a very coveted asset, and it attracts the attention of violent men who use violence, fraud, and intimidation to tear these families out of the homes that they live in and the land that they depend on to survive. And so what we do is we deploy teams of local justice professionals, so local attorneys, local private investigators, local social workers, to intervene directly in those cases. So our teams partner with local law enforcement, so local police officers, local prosecutors, local magistrates, and intervene directly in individual cases, essentially running shadow operations behind the police and behind prosecutors with a goal of physically and legally restoring those women and children to the homes that they rightfully own, and then securing the arrest and prosecution of the criminals that stole that land, and then broadcasting that result as widely as possible so that anybody who thinks it's a good idea to steal from a woman or a child knows that the law is going to come after them. And so it's really just practical intervention. Our private investigators are investigating just like the police would. Our attorneys are putting together briefs and witness statements to support the prosecution of these criminals. And we're just ensuring that these cases move down the tracks until they achieve their result.
How does Redeem identify women who are being persecuted in this particular way?
Yeah. There's a lot of different ways that we do that. In the early days, we get kind of our early referrals typically from local law enforcement. But then over time, we develop kind of a network of relationships with political leaders, religious leaders, cultural leaders that hear about these things in their community, and they'll bring the cases to us. We also get referrals just straight from, like, once we've put a family back in their home, word gets out and they'll send referrals our way. And then we also do have local undercover operatives that are kind of monitoring the community and helping us to learn about cases that are out there.
So, Greg, you've done a lot of work in terms of international business and development. That's what your expertise was ultimately in, and it kind of led you to this kind of the field of sorts. Could you speak a little bit to how the work that Redeem does in Uganda contributes to, certainly the flourishing of these communities in these areas of Uganda, but how does it, I guess I'm thinking about people in this room who've never been to Uganda, who might never ever go to Uganda, but how does it make the world better for them?
Yeah, well, and as Jesse was sort of saying, in Uganda, I'd say land is life. It's everything to these women and their children who are on it. And so in order for them to really have any chance to flourish, any chance to live life there, they need this land. They need access to it. And so I feel like at times it's different for us. We might be like, well, they could just move somewhere else or look for a different opportunity, or I mean, it's life or death for them in those places. So I think when you think of Uganda too, think of a rural place where you're growing lots of crops. It's right on the equator, so there's you can grow all kinds of things, and this is the way that they would be able to produce coffee, produce bananas, produce whatever, and sell it so their kids can go to school, so those kids get an education, so that they end up having a job. And without it, there is really nothing. Yeah.
So you all, or both of you, attended JBU. You were students back in the late 90s. Some of my students have called it the 1900s, which is a little distressing, but it's technically true. Campus has changed a lot since you were here. I'm wondering what JBU did specifically that might have prepared you for this work. Like, what was it about being students at John Brown University, getting the education that you did, that prepared you, or I guess cultivated this heart for you? And then, no one's listening and is going to kick you off campus if you say, here's what we wish JBU would have done a little bit differently, or something we realized later on that we didn't quite get from college.
Yeah, I could start by saying, I lived in New Orleans area in high school and came here and remember just being like, wow, there are people from across the United States, from around the world, with all kinds of different experiences. Their parents worked in very different things. And then because it's a small enough community, you kind of get to know everybody too. So I feel like where others I've talked to might have moved somewhere and been like, oh, we're all from New Orleans, let's all get together and hang out, and we sort of know that, and that's our place in this university that's larger. Here it was like I made really close friends from literally all around the world. And so that just did sort of expand the world for me in a very practical way. And I think maybe, I would start hearing stories of work people's families did throughout the world. But even as simple as just, living in a very distant place within the United States. So I think that was the start to me of going, oh my gosh, the world is so much bigger and so much more interesting to explore. And I feel like that was for me a huge part of the John Brown experience, of just being like, wow, I want to explore that. And then within classes, it was the same thing. You're sitting in a class, and I was doing international business, so somebody would be talking about business that was done somewhere internationally, but actually had lived there and knew about it, as opposed to just sort of like, oh, maybe this is how it's done. So at least that's the first thing that comes to mind for me, is just that exposure to the much broader world that's out there.
Yeah, I would say it's like kind of the expansion of the world, of my world, that would be the thing. I think in terms of, people from all over the country, people from all over the world, like expanding it that way. But I also think providing a space to really wrestle with my faith. Like, I came out of high school and I thought I had like Christianity all figured out. Like, this is what it was. And honestly, it was like, these are the rules that you have to follow, and this is the right way to think. And if you do those things and you think that way, then you're a Christian. And well, that makes you better than everybody else. Like that, I was an unpleasant human. And I came here and I met all sorts of people who were at all different levels of their pursuit of Jesus. Like, I met Greg, and Greg was a much better human than I was. Like, we got paired together and I was like, I'm really sorry, because I am not as fully formed of a human yet as you are. And like, I met my wife, Amy, and she's like 18 steps in front of me. And she was being mentored by Anne. And I got to like question those things and see how people really wanted to use their faith to actually love other humans. And I would say that was by far the most important thing for me, was to just see what faith acted out could actually look like.
We'll come back a little bit more to JBU here in a moment. Thinking about James's call in right? His letter, right, about pure and undefiled religion, caring for the orphans and the widows. This is something that those of us who grew up in the church are very familiar with, or at least this phrase. Given that this is the work that you do on a regular basis, do you sometimes, without throwing the American church under the bus entirely, do you find that sometimes there's a little bit of a blind spot as to what this looks like in practice? Go ahead.
Yes. I mean, there's a massive blind spot, but that's not anybody's fault, right? Like when I sit down across the table from somebody and tell them about what we do, they look at me like I've got three heads. Like that doesn't happen. And so one of the kind of core objectives to our mission is that we want to awaken the world to what it means to care for the widow and the orphan in the 21st century. Because honestly, in the church that I grew up in the church that probably most of you grew up in, like when you read James 1:27, it says pure and undefiled religion is to care for widows and orphans in their distress. What you think that's commanding you to do is to bring a widow a pie at Christmas because she's sad. And you should definitely bring a widow a pie at Christmas because she's sad. But what you believe is that this stuff that's in the Bible, like the story of Ruth, that doesn't happen anymore. And that's just not true. Like we did a survey, we looked at research across all of Africa, and basically what it found was that over 50% of widows lose everything after they lose their husband. Like all of those stories that you read in the Old Testament, those are still happening right now. And all of those commands from the prophet Isaiah, from James, like those are metaphors, but they're not metaphors. They're real. And so there's a massive blind spot in the church, but that's not their fault. Like you can't hold somebody accountable for something they don't know exists. And so part of our job is to make sure that the church is aware and awakened to that reality, because I believe that the church will stand up and do what it's supposed to do if it is aware.
Could you speak a little bit about the vision? Because we talked about this at dinner. Right now, Redeem is focused almost exclusively in Uganda, and there's some reasons for this. But you're looking to expand into other countries. What would an expanded role for Redeem look like, and what are the challenges of expanding to other legal contexts and countries?
Yeah. So right now, our operations are pretty much exclusively in Uganda. And just 3 weeks ago, we actually launched a pilot program in Zambia. And so when we were looking to expand, we basically looked all across sub-Saharan Africa and found that you could throw a dart at the map and you would find widows and orphans who are being driven out of their homes. And so as we looked at where we could be most effective, what we looked for is countries where there are high abuse rates, which aren't hard to find, but also countries where there are laws on the books that actually make it illegal to do this. So in Uganda, there are 3 different laws that criminalize stealing land from a widow or an orphan. I mean, it's also illegal to burn somebody's house down or to rape them or to, kill them. But we're not an advocacy organization. We don't come in and say, hey, country X, you should have laws that say this. What we do is we find countries that already have the laws that say that, and then we say, how can we help you enforce them? So we're looking for high abuse rates, good laws on the books, some semblance of a justice system, and a government that's willing to partner with us in doing the work.
Yeah, one thing I might add on that is we need to operate as well. So it's my job as a chief operating officer. And so we're almost looking for, if you have a place that's in civil war that really is extraordinarily chaotic, we probably can't operate because you sort of do need law enforcement around. Maybe they're not doing their job, but they're kind of there and could do their job. So if it's just complete chaos, we probably can't function there. At the same time, we're trying to go where people are the most vulnerable, where there are the most widows and orphans. at risk and being taken advantage of. So it's like we kind of do this analysis to see where is that sweet spot that we can work. And others should be working in other places and other aspects, but for our casework type to function, it needs to sort of be right in between those spaces of some ability to function, but not too high, because then why are we even there?
Hearing you speak this evening, it's a reminder of that this is, in many respects, a very narrow focus of the work that you're doing. But even this very narrow focus has the potential to affect countless people in the most dire circumstances. So it's a reminder that the smallest contributions that we make in our daily lives, whatever that might look like for us, can make a significant difference to the people on the receiving end of these things. It's just a reminder of the enormity of the problem of evil in the world, but also the potential for the people of God's kingdom to be pushing back against the darkness. So I think that's really encouraging. You mentioned that you're not an advocacy organization, right? Going in and attempting to change the laws. Do you partner with advocacy organizations? Are there groups out there that are lobbying governments to try to change this? Or is this kind of an issue that doesn't get a lot of attention internationally?
We don't have any formal partnerships with advocacy organizations. What I have found is that by and large, there are laws on the books. And the other thing I would say is that people live in reality. And I think that there's often a lot of energy that is focused on incrementally improving the law. And there's some value in that in certain contexts. But in a place where the law is just not being enforced at all, adding another comma or another clause to make the law a little bit stronger doesn't do anything. And you can have a big parade and you can have this great big event to say, look, we made the law even stronger. And everybody goes home and says they're not enforcing it anyway, and it doesn't matter. But what does matter is if they see it enforced. And so that's what we do, is we make sure it gets enforced and that everybody sees it. And so, I'm all in favor of advocacy organizations. They should be advocating, and that's wonderful if they do. But at the end of the day, somebody told me this the other day, a policy is not a policy unless it's policed. And so what we do is we make sure that it's policed.
Great. So turning our attention back to Siloam and John Brown University in particular, what are some things you'd encourage the students here in this room and your conversations with them on campus in the future? What are some things that they can do tangibly to try to move and affect the situations beyond their individual communities here? Like, what are some things they can be doing as students right now to contribute to the sorts of work that you all are engaged in, or even similar kinds of work that go beyond Siloam Springs?
Well, I would say there's probably a long-term and a short-term answer. I'll give the long-term answer. The long-term answer is be really good at what you do. I had this, like I said, I met Gary Haugen, the founder of IJM, right when he was getting started. And he told me this wonderful vision. And I was like, that's so wonderful. I was like, how could I get involved with that? And Gary was really awesome. And basically what he did is he patted me on the head and he was like, you have no marketable skills whatsoever. He's like, do you want to help? Like, do you want to actually help? Then study really, really hard and be the best in your class. And then study really hard on the LSAT and get an incredible score and get into the best law school that you can get into, and then be at the top of your class in that law school, and then go work for a law firm that will teach you how to be an amazing lawyer. Do it all on their dime. And then give me a call. Because I don't need you and I don't want you until you have something to offer.
Can I interject something really
Yeah.
quick? So this was when you were at American Studies program.
I was a sophomore here at John Brown.
How long was it before, from that initial head patting and conversation, before you started work at IJM?
7 years. And there was an interim head patting because I applied for a position at IJM, and they were like, you have no, this was after I went to law school and had been at the firm for 2 years. And they were like, you have no marketable skills whatsoever. Why have you applied for this job? Because essentially what Gary said is, I want somebody who is professionally excellent. There's a scripture that says, work as though you're working for the Lord, not working for men. And sometimes it feels like we do that the opposite. And we're like, well, if I work for the Lord, I can kind of do it halfway. Because I really care a lot. But that's not what Paul's saying. Like Paul's saying, like, no, work as though you're working for the Lord. Like, do it at the next level. Be excellent at what you want to do. Now, that doesn't mean you can't get involved in the short term. That means you can't volunteer. That doesn't mean all of these things that you can get involved in. But it does mean something to be professionally excellent. It does mean something to sharpen your axe before you go trying to chop down a tree. And so I think the best way that you can influence things long-term in the world is to focus on being as excellent as you can possibly be in whatever it is. Like Greg was in finance and international business. And he was like, I don't know how that fits in, but it does. I went to law school not thinking I was going to be prosecuting land grabbers in rural Uganda, but I am. So if you work to be professionally excellent and if you make yourself available to God, I do believe he will find an opportunity to use you in the kingdom.
Yeah, I mean, I think I completely agree with all of that, and it's sort of a beautiful thing to look back on in life and be like, wow, that was happening all that time. I can't believe it. And I don't know this is true for everyone, but I'll sort of say it again for me. I remember thinking like I feel like I want to do something, but I don't know what that thing is. And that's anyone here. I would just encourage you. I think that's fine. I think, again, God calls himself our father, our parent for a reason. Like when I look at my daughter, I don't expect her to be doing things with excellence, especially when she was little. I just love that she wants to do something with me, right? She just wants to be there. And I think that's part of it is like, okay, God, here I am, right? And I want to do something. And then, as Jesse described, let me do it with excellence. Let me take the next step. Let me try this thing. And I don't think I would have realized being here at John Brown, I think it will be protecting people in poverty from violence. I think I had very different ideas of what it might be that I would be doing throughout my life. But in learning some skills, learning things that I like to do and doing them well and taking the next step. And then eventually, in my case, like 10 years later, coming across this type of work and being like, okay, now something definitely is awakening me and going, I feel like I was created to really care about this. And now I have excellence that I can bring to bear on it. And as I said, now it's just sort of amazing to sit back and see, but I would not have, I've known that earlier. And I think it's fine. Just take those steps, explore, try, but in the meantime, become excellent in the things you're doing.
Well, I have some more questions I'd like to ask, but I'd also like to recognize that there might be questions from you all. I know this isn't a particularly big room tonight, but if you do have questions that you would like to interject, you have more than the invitation to cut me off and ask questions of our guests tonight. So if there's any questions, just please raise your hand and we'll get to those. I'd like to ask a question to maybe have you reflect on some of the work that you guys are doing, maybe just a little briefly. This is probably pretty heavy work at times in terms of dealing with some pretty difficult circumstances and situations and seeing what your teams are doing in Uganda. I'm wondering if you could share with us an example of something recently and maybe just didn't have to be both of you to answer both parts of this, but is there something that's happened in your line of work recently that's made you laugh or smile, or it's been kind of like something that's been funny? Even I like humor. I like to laugh at stuff, or something in particular maybe that's been really encouraging, like lately that you've, and this can be recently too. Like, has there been something that just kind of caught your attention immediately, like, oh, that was funny, or that was really encouraging from this work?
I've got one. We were both in Uganda last week. Actually, we were onboarding staff members and launching them out. And I mean, this may be weird, but I think one of the things I do love just about international and cross-cultural situations is inevitably funny stuff is going to happen. You know, you're trying to figure it out and you don't know what's happening. So I definitely like putting myself in these places where like weird stuff's going to happen and make me laugh. And so I visited one of our teams, and I'm the chief operating officer. So they're like, "Oh, let's make a big deal about this." And at some part, it's a team of about 8 people, and so the lead of that team was like, "We got something for you." And I was like, "Yeah, I figured that might happen." And this is always where it's entertaining. You're like, "What's it going to be?" This is very cross-cultural. This is in Uganda, rural Uganda. I'm like, it could be anything. This could be very exciting. So it's like in our culture, when the important person visits you, they get a chair. So, and then like they start this music and the team's like dancing and they're bringing out this, and they've bought me a chair that they're going to give to me. And so I'm kind of like, I got to get on a plane. Like I can't, what am I to do with this chair? But I'm like, "Thank you so much." And then, then they're like, "All right, sit in the chair and let's gather behind you and we're going to take pictures." And, so just moments like that. I mean, it's momentarily funny, but I love it. Like it does just bring a smile on my face and go, this is so fun to just be like, what is happening here? Yeah.
Did you learn about that in your international business classes? Probably not.
No.
Didn't come up.
Didn't
Okay.
come up. No.
We'll work on that. Do you have something?
I was trying to think of something recent, but I've got a better story, but it is older. So when we were first doing this work, like you run arrest operations, right? Like you want to arrest the bad guys. And we had this one perpetrator that we were going out to arrest, and he'd been really hard to find and hard to catch. And Clever and Sam were going to arrest him, and they were going to help the police get this guy in the back of the truck that was being arrested. And the guy, instead of running, what he decided to do was take off all of his clothing. Because he knew that the police officers wouldn't touch him if he was naked. And so they're like trying to get him in the car, and he's unbuttoning his shirt and unzipping his pants. And we're like, stop it, get in the truck. And by the end of the day, like he's naked, and he's still not in the truck, and none of the police officers will touch him. And so we had to drive away, and we had to arrest him a different day. But yeah, stuff like that you don't see coming when you wake up in the morning, that you're like, I'm just going to be dealing with a naked guy. Yeah.
And I imagine, and again, just for the record, Jesse went to a fairly elite law school at the University of Virginia. Did you cover that in your law school classes?
Wasn't one of our classes. No.
Okay.
No.
Life surprises you, I guess is what we're learning tonight. Thinking back in your time more at JBU, a little more reflective, did you have a favorite professor? And you could name them, they might not be here anymore, but what was it about that professor that you so appreciated?
Yeah, for me, it was Professor Morell, Lucas Morell. He led he was you back in the day. And he was by far the smartest person I'd ever met. And his analysis and his just pursuit of the truth was amazing. And the fact that he took such an interest in me and invested so heavily, basically spent 6 months one-on-one training me for the LSAT so that I could get into the law schools that I got into, and caring enough to talk to my girlfriend about what law school would look like and how that would change me as a human. Like he was an amazing mentor, an amazing professor.
Yeah, I think of several professors, and I think the thing that jumps out to me is their willingness to do what you're talking about. Sort of, it's not just I'm instructing you in class, and maybe even I'll talk to you a little on the side. It was more like, what do you want to do, and how do I help you get there? And let me take time to talk to you about things, questions you have and things you're mulling over. And that just seemed very common throughout my time. So I'll mention one professor that you guys may have heard of. Dr. Walters was a Bible professor that was also, caring for his wife in a really difficult situation. And so as he would teach, you sort of know he's doing all that, he's dealing with all these other things, wrestling with these things, and he's talking about the theology behind them was always very powerful. But then meanwhile, if I was like, hey, I have these questions about this, he's like, sure. And, I like, you probably have many other better things to do, but he did just genuinely seem to, want to love on us as students. So.
That was kind of a selfish question on my part, because I just like to hear what good qualities of excellent professors are like. So thank you for sharing. Again, if you guys have any specific questions you'd like to ask, feel free to interrupt at any point. Yeah, go ahead, please. And I'll repeat it for the recording.
The work that you do is endless. I mean, you could work 24/7 and there would still just be so much to continue doing. And yet you both have wives and children and neighbors and church communities and all of this. How do you handle the intensity and the heavy burden of the work with just your families and normal life as well?
Yeah, so the question is, how do you handle the intensity of this really heavy work in terms of hours, but also just the content and balancing that with your responsibilities, with your families, with your churches, and all other aspects of your daily life?
Yeah, I can talk about it some. I think it actually helps to have such intense things happening and heavy things, so that you don't be confused by your ability to control it or make it happen just by more effort, because it is an immense problem that you're never going to solve. You're never going to get to the end of it. And so, one of the things that Jesse set up with Redeem that's fantastic is these spiritual rhythms we go through to connect us back to God in the midst of it. And this is for all of us. We have 140 people in Uganda, and every day they're doing this as well. They're starting their days in corporate prayer and in times of stillness to be reminded of that you're not just what you can do that day. You're the beloved child of God, and that's your identity, and that's where you work from, not from, am I successful? Am I not? Even in these very important things. And so you absolutely have to start there. I think it will break you, or you'll start not doing anything else in life. You're like, this is just so important. But to remember, oh yeah, this is God's work. It's his weight to carry this, and he's invited me as his child in to be part of it, but I am not responsible for it. And it's easy to say that now, but yeah, when you're in it, it's tough. And that's why that truly daily reminders of that and rhythms of that are so crucial to keep that mindset.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think one of the things that I struggle with in that maybe some of the others don't, but like, I think the scripture of like, do not think of yourself more highly than you ought. Yeah, I'm not that important in the whole grand scheme of things. And kind of figuring out at some point, I did not figure this out very early. And there were some dark times in there, but figuring out that you're a finite resource. Like, you serve an infinite God, but you're a finite resource. And like, you can provide the most benefit at a certain level. And if you exceed that level, like, you actually, there's diminishing returns on that investment. And so if you can figure out where that level is, and then it's actually not just okay to put the burden down, it's actually better to put the burden down, because that allows you to do it the next day, and that allows you to do it the next day. And so I think a little bit of just getting over yourself and not thinking that you have to do everything, or that, yeah, you're actually responsible for it. Like you're an invited guest into all of this stuff at the end of the day.
So you've been talking about achieving excellence. As students at this university, we all want to achieve excellence. So putting yourself into our shoes, what's one piece of social advice that you give us? One piece of spiritual advice, one piece of academic advice that you can go and take and apply in the years to come?
Question was, what's a piece of spiritual advice, academic advice, and social advice that you would give to students today, and how that could affect them in the years to come? You stepped on my last question, by the way, but I'll let it slide.
I'll go social first. Surround yourself with good people, like with people that you admire, not necessarily people that you agree with, but people that you admire. And when I say admire, like you admire their character, you admire their integrity, you admire the way that they're wrestling with God. And take advantage of that here, because there are people that are like that here. And you won't find that again. That you have that many people that way, that you can really interact with and surround yourself with. So that'd be the first one. That's the social. Academic. Look for the toughest professors you can find. Because 9 times out of 10, they're going to be the best professors that actually want to pour into you. The ones that hold you to a high standard. And pursue them. Because if they're giving you a hard time in the classroom, they care about whether you come out excellent on the other end. What was the third? Spiritual?
Spiritual, yeah.
Yeah, get over yourself. Do not think of yourself more highly than you ought. And recognize that you're a finite person serving an infinite God.
Yeah, and I might echo on the spiritual, I think very similar to what you said on social, that this is a place where there's a lot that's about the spiritual realm going on, and people with different views and access to that will not exist again. And so it is a time to sort of explore, in my mind, be like, oh, there's so many people around here and so many people within the university that have thoughts about that. Like, let me learn about that. Let me understand that. It can be so easy to go, as Jesse said, like I arrived here too going like, I've been in youth group and I know all the stuff I know about Christianity. And it almost took a while to realize, wow, there are amazing people here and they think things very differently than me. Let me learn about that. Let me spend time on that and just be exposed to it, because it's helpful. So yeah, similar to the social part, I feel like on the spiritual part too.
Well, I think that's actually a perfect place to conclude for tonight. You really did step on my last question, but that was fantastic. Jesse and Greg, thank you so much for being here this evening and in this week as well. Of course, Jesse spoke in chapel on Thursday. He'll be speaking on chapel again he spoke on Tuesday. He'll be speaking again on Thursday, unless Greg flips a coin and he'll take it instead. By the way, I don't know if you caught this. I knew I was forgetting something. A moment ago, Greg said that he echoes something that Jesse said. And this is officially an evangelical meeting that we just had, because someone echoed something. So well done there. Thank you all for being here tonight. And let's thank our guests for being here as well.
unspoken